Hey there everyone, welcome back to another episode of Ghosts in the Machine. And in this episode, we are going to review an episode of Ghost Adventures. Yay! Specifically, episode 2 of season number 27. 27, is that right? It is? What? This episode is called The Houdini Séance, and it specifically deals with, you guessed it, a Houdini Séance, trying to contact Harry Houdini via a séance in the Winchester Mystery House. Woohoo! Okay, so I definitely wanted to take a closer look at this episode for several reasons. First, I'm a big fan of Harry Houdini. I love his work, especially the work exposing fraudulent mediums. I love that part. It's mwah. Second, in my experience, Mr. Bagans tends to embellish and make assumptions and fail to properly research his claims and ignore logical explanations, even when he provides them himself in the episode, which we'll see later in this video. Thirdly, the advertisement for this specific episode claimed to provide the most shocking photographic evidence ever. Having a love of photography and knowing a thing or two about it, and having decades of experience analyzing alleged paranormal photos, I was interested, to say the least. So I really wanted to get into it, and basically I bit the spirit bullet and suffered through an hour of overdramatic, technobabble, nonsensical ghost hunting in order to get all the details and figure out what he was doing, what he was claiming, and what he was presenting to the public, and if it was correct or not. So let's get into it. So just in case you don't know who Harry Houdini is or you're not familiar with him, let me give you just a brief history, a brief summary of who he was. So Harry Houdini was born Eric Weitz on March 24th, 1874 in Budapest, Hungary. He was later known as Eric Weiss with an S. After his family moved to the United States, he became one of history's most famous magicians and escape artists. He rose to fame in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, and he dazzled audiences around the world with daring feats such as escaping from handcuffs, straitjackets, locked crates submerged underwater, and even the famous milk crate that he did, the milk can trick that he did. His innovative techniques and fearless showmanship set new standards in the world of stage magic, transforming escape artistry into a celebrated form of entertainment. Well, that was the best reading from a teleprompter I've ever done. Beyond his career as a performer, Houdini was also a dedicated skeptic and investigator of spiritualists and mediums. This is my favorite part. In the 1920s, disturbed by what he saw as widespread fraud, exploiting grief and belief, he used his knowledge of illusion and deception to debunk those claiming to communicate with the dead. His efforts made him both respected and controversial among believers in spiritualism. Houdini's life was cut short on October 31st, 1926, in Detroit, Michigan, following complications from a ruptured appendix. But his legacy as a legendary magician and outspoken skeptic endures to this day. God damn, he was a good man. Alright, so before we dive into the episode itself, I want to explain something. I want to give a disclaimer. I'm not going to go piece by piece, section by section of the episode itself. That would take way too long. There's too much wrong in that episode to go over it like that. What I'm going to do is pick out specific points and talk about them. Points that I know I can get corrections on or provide some additional information, so proper context, and also reveal things that they are not showing you in the episode that are likely causing the weird or supernatural things that are going on. So basically an overview of the episode, so you have proper context, is that Zak and his team go to the Winchester Mystery House and they set up a Houdini Séance. And it's like part Houdini Séance, part ghost hunt, because they do both during the episode. But the main part is that they sit around a table and they try to contact Houdini. They have a relative of his, a descendant that comes in. They bring in a psychic and a warlock, I think, who really are not trying to be disrespectful, but they have nothing to do with the whole storyline. It's more for just fun, I guess. I don't know. Anyway, so they set up this Houdini Séance. They take some pictures, they set up a bunch of equipment, and they make it seem like they made contact with Houdini. And then they do a ghost hunt where they go around and they use all kinds of weird gadgets that are as far from scientific as possible, at least in the way that they're using them. And it's a typical ghost hunting show. So with that, I'm going to get into some of the segments.
So for the very first time, we are going to use every piece of equipment that we have. We're going to add some other scientific instruments with our technology now, and it's a lot more since 2011, and it's a whole lot more than the 1930s. We, through the usage of instrumental spirit communication, a department of paranormal research that we excel.
So this beginning part is more of a guilty pleasure. Those of you who know me and have followed my work know I am no fan of Zak Bagans, nor am I a fan of ghost hunting equipment, which is what he's talking about in this clip. He's talking about scientific equipment, which some of it is used for scientific purposes. Just, it's not what he does. So he uses it in completely different context, without experimental controls, without any control over the environment or any of the variables that could influence the equipment that he's using. And a lot of it is for novelty, whether it's a REM pod or an Ovilus or something like that, which we see being used, one of those Ovilus things that random word generator that we'll see later. He's using all this equipment that is directed to ghost hunters, marketed to ghost hunters that do not detect ghosts. It's never been proven to detect ghosts. It's never been proven to communicate with ghosts, or that ghosts can communicate with the devices, or that ghosts exist whatsoever. So he's already starting at a deficit when he goes into this episode, and every other episode where he uses this stuff. The biggest problem that I see with this clip is that he puts himself up on this pedestal as a expert, that they excel in this instrumental spirit communication thing. They don't excel at pretty much anything except entertainment and exploiting claims or people or embellishing claims. I mean, the man claimed to write a book, this one, and he didn't even write it. He got somebody else to write it. And that person didn't even write it. Well, he did originally, but he just recycled a book that he had written years before and then put a new cover on it. Oh, I forgot. He also plagiarized a lot of people. That you can see over here if you go to that article. But he can't even teach you something that he allegedly excels in. So from the start, don't take this seriously, even if you do. I think most of the viewers of this show, of the series and my work, understand that he is for entertainment only. But if you don't, if you're watching this for the first time, it's the first time you're seeing this, seeing my kind of work, and you're like, what the hell's going on here? Just know that Ghost Adventures is for entertainment. It's not a serious investigation. It is not any way, shape, or form a scientific investigation. And that's all I really want to say about that. Let's move on to more of the episode.
But in 1938, Bess decided to try again at the Winchester Mystery House. And it was planned. Everything was all set up. But for whatever reason, it didn't happen.
He's got to put that over-dramatic spin on it, you know? You can't just say it never happened or it fell through. It has to be, for whatever reason, it never happened. Dun, dun, dun. So the official Houdini Séance was conducted by Bess Houdini, his wife, and it went on for 10 years after his death. So Houdini died on October 31st, 1926, and the Houdini Séance, the official one, went on until 1936. And at that 1936 final Houdini Séance, which took place on the roof of the Knickerbocker Hotel, Bess pretty much made her feelings clear on the matter, and I'm not going to tell you what happened. I'm going to let her tell you in her own voice. So check this out.
Mrs. Houdini, the 0 hour has passed. The 10 years are up. Have you reached a decision?
Yes. Houdini did not come through. My last hope is gone. I do not believe that Houdini can come back to me or to anyone. After faithfully following through the 10-year Houdini compact, using every type, medium, and seance, It is now my personal and positive belief that spirit communication in any form is impossible. I do not believe that ghosts or spirits exist. The Houdini shrine has burned for 10 years. I now reverently turn out the light. It is finished. Good night, Harry.
So, as you can hear, she didn't believe that it was possible. She didn't believe that spirits existed. She didn't believe that Houdini could make it through. She didn't believe anyone could talk to spirits or hear from spirits. And she pretty much closed that chapter of her life. And that was it. So this brings me back to Zak Bagans and his episode here where he's talking about Bess Houdini planning another seance in 1938, 2 years after the final one was done.
But in 1938, Bess decided to try again.
Now, don't get me wrong. There were other people that tried to do the seance. They continued the seance. I have a friend, Dorothy Dietrich, who is a well-known magician, and she used to be called the female Houdini, and she does a Houdini seance. There were other psychics and mediums and magicians over the years that continued this tradition, but the official one from Bess Houdini was done. She was done with it, and she was moving on with her life. So going back to this Zak Bagans statement that Bess was planning it. So I've never heard that before. This is the first time I've come across it, so I did some digging, and I wound up at the Wild About Harry website again, hosted by John Cox, who is pretty much the world's expert on this. And not only did I do some research on his site, but I spoke to John about this. And there's a letter. We do know that there was a letter from Arthur Hinzen. I'm totally reading off my notes here. Arthur Hinzen, who was the vice president of the Pacific Coast Association of Magicians, to Edward Saint, who was, at the time of 1938, that was Bess Houdini's kind of magic partner or agent, or some think they were an item together. But that really doesn't matter. The letter was to Edward Saint, and it was talking about this idea of having a seance, a Houdini seance, with Bess Houdini attending and a bunch of other people, and having it at the Winchester Mystery House. So the letter, which I'll put up here so you guys can read along, simply states, I think the idea as far as publicity for the PCAM, Mrs. Houdini, and the Winchester House would be very fine, and all the probabilities handled right might hit the press syndicate. Will you please advise me as to your idea on this matter? Also, the time and date of such proposed seance. So it sounds like it was already an idea that was being tossed around within the Pacific Coast Association of Magicians, and that they finally said, all right, let's reach out to Ed Saint and Bess Houdini and see if they're on board. Because at the end of that letter, it's asking about a time and date. And this is, when is this? This is May 24th of 1938. Which would have been just about 2 months before the actual conference. Also, in the July 1938 issue of Genie magazine, there is a scoop. So it looks like there's a column, and I'll put this up here so you guys can see it. It's a column called Flash, and it's like news items and I guess gossip in the magic community. It's a scoop, or a flash, as they call it, where Ed Saint will conduct a seance from the famous Mystery House in San Jose, July 20th, in an attempt to contact the spirits of Houdini, Carter, Thurston, Keller, and all the other great magicians that have died. Present will be Mrs. Houdini, Mrs. Carter, Chester Morris, and the officers and board of directors of the PCAM. I guess the idea was thrown out there to see if there was interest, but in all of this, this is only 2 items that we were able to find, or that I was able to find, and after I talked to John Cox from the Wild About Harry website, these are the only 2 items that we could find that advertised Bess Houdini possibly being involved with a seance. But none of it actually says that Bess was planning it, or that she was part of the discussion. It sounds more like the PCAM people were toying with this idea, and then finally brought it to Ed Saint. And Ed Saint, which, this is my speculation here, likely brought it to Bess, and Bess was like, I'm done. I was finished with that 2 years ago. I'm not doing it again, because that was the contract. That was the pact that she made with her husband to do it for 10 years, and then stop. So it was kind of sacred to her. When the conference actually did come around in July, the end of July, there was no seance. Bess Houdini actually did a performance, a magic performance, but she did not do a seance. There was no seance at the Winchester house. So I don't think there's any mystery here. I think it's a matter of she didn't want to disrespect the promise that she made her husband, and that was it. She had made up her mind. So I think it's kind of silly to add on that dramatic effect to make it sound like there were mysterious circumstances surrounding why it never happened in 1938, when in reality there's just a much more down-to-earth reason. So let's move on.
Houdini, he wasn't an arch skeptic, the way we think of some skeptics who just don't believe anything and were out to expose everything. Houdini was a seeker, and he characterized himself, he said, I'm seeking the truth. And he was a believer in spiritualism, and what he was doing was he was going to mediums to try and find the real thing.
Whoa. Did he just say that Houdini was a believer in spiritualism? I don't think so. I mean, I've never heard that before. At the most, I've heard that he was open-minded about it, that he tried several mediums and spiritualists, and over time he just realized that it was bullshit and it wasn't real. So this is something new. And I watched this clip over and over again. Originally, I wasn't going to include it in here, but then I was like, you know what? It's putting it out there to the public. It's presenting this idea that Houdini believed in something that he didn't. And I wanted to make sure I got clarification. And for me, the best you can do is go to the primary source and ask, like, why? And in this case, the primary source was John Cox from the episode. So I reached out to him, and he was very nice, very kind. I asked him if I could interview him and do a short recording of this, and he agreed. I'm going to stop talking and go right to the interview. All right, so here I am with John Cox, who is the guy that runs the Wild About Harry website, which is an awesome website. I've used it for years to keep up to date on everything Houdini. So this is the gentleman that was in the episode, and he was speaking with Zak. He was in the interview, and the quote that we just heard is from him. And now we're at the source. So can you clarify for us, like, what was actually said and what was meant?
Houdini was a believer in spiritualism. I said it. It must be true. When I saw that, I said, wow, did I just say that? Okay, so here's what I think I said. I'm almost sure this is what I said. And that was, Houdini was a believer in spiritualism in his youth. Okay. In his youth, got dropped out.
Okay.
Now, it's still not a correct sentence, because saying Houdini was a believer in spirit, and even Houdini said at one time, I was almost a believer. Saying Houdini was a believer in spiritualism is different from what he was a believer in, and that was the possibility that one could speak to the dead. And that was something that he always said, I have an open mind to. I'm a seeker. I'm an investigator. And privately, he very much believed that this should be possible. You should be able to communicate with your loved ones. Saying he was a believer in spiritualism, the religion, there's no evidence of that. I think he saw that as fishy from the start, because he dabbled in the tricks of spiritualism. His escape act was very much rooted in the tricks of spiritualism.
Right.
So I made a mess of it. I was trying to make a larger point for them that, what Houdini did is what they were doing. He was an investigator. He was a seeker of the truth. He was open to the possibility of it in his youth. He went to a seance with his mother. He had an open mind to the possibility to it then. But it coming out as such a statement that Houdini was a believer in spiritualism, I think Houdini would have something to say about that, and I would be in big trouble with Houdini if he heard me say that. So I apologize for that, and this is what happens when you do interviews and you babble on as I do. They can make you say anything they want, which is not something they said to me during that show. But another interview I was doing at one point, they said, we'll make you say anything we want.
Yeah. Unfortunately, that's television. Once they have the recording, they can pretty much do whatever they want. And I mean, in the past, when I've been approached to do TV interviews, I always ask them, do I have final approval? Like, I want to be able to look at the final product before you put it out. And usually it's no. And then I decline because I don't want to be taken out of context or have the last part of my sentence cut off. But I appreciate it because we've spoken back and forth over the last 2 days through email and stuff. And you sent me additional articles about like when he was 17 and they went to a spiritualist. They went to like 3 or 4 to try to figure out a family issue because when the father passed away, they had a problem, I guess, with the insurance papers. And I'm assuming, this is me assuming, that they were desperate to figure out what was going on, and as a last ditch measure, they went to see some mediums. And the point that I had brought up that I thought was interesting to me is that they went to 3 to 4 mediums for this, when honestly one should have done. Like they should have been the one and done. That's it. But they had to go to 3 to 4, and it doesn't look like they got an answer anyway.
No.
So, but yeah, even in that newspaper article that you sent me, he had doubts, and he said that at age 17 he had doubts about spiritualism. So, and
he said specifically that's when it started.
Right.
He went there and he found it baffling that his father, he did communicate, but it was always just platitude. Oh, I'm so happy here in heaven, everything is great. And they had a very specific question they needed answered, and why wouldn't he answer that? Maybe this is bogus.
And it's pointed out on your blog post that they were there specifically because they were having trouble. They were in a bind.
Yeah.
And to have a message come through saying, "Oh, I'm very happy here in the afterlife," like, what kind of bullshit is that? Yeah. Your family's suffering, but you're okay in heaven. That's great. Helping them out. But yeah. Okay, cool. Thank you so much for clearing that up. I appreciate it. And that's really all I wanted to do. Just clear that part up and so that the viewers can see your behind the scenes perspective and understand it. So thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me on.
Awesome.
We have received communication from that other side, intelligent. We've had questions answered multiple times. It's irrefutable.
Irrefutable? Irrefutable. You keep using that word. I do not think it means what you think it means. Next. All right, so I want to preface this next clip with just a little bit of information to give you context, because I kind of jump right into the clip, like mid-scene, because I don't want to use too much of the footage, because Zak Bagans has a reputation of causing trouble for YouTube channels that review his content. So we'll leave it at that. Anyway, so Sally Winchester died September 22nd, 1922, and in April of 1923, John and Mamie, I think it's Mamie, Brown, so John Brown and his wife Mamie, leased the grounds to start doing tours. So they renovated a little bit and they started doing tours. And then over a year later, October 29th, 1924, that's when Houdini visits. So the point here that I'm trying to make is that the superstitions and rumors that were spreading about Sally Winchester were spread before she died. And we're going to get into that a little bit later when we have Adrian Hill on. But I wanted to make that point because in the context of this next clip that you're going to see, John Brown receives a letter from Harry Houdini, so a newspaper clipping. And on top of it, there's a notation there, and it's signed by Houdini. And the newspaper clipping is about the Winchester house. And in it, Houdini is quoted saying certain things, repeating certain things about Sally Winchester and her, I guess, actions or antics or routines during the time that she lived in the house. And these superstitions were probably not only embraced by John Brown, but they were probably promoted to get that spookiness and eerie kind of entertainment value out of the tourist attraction that he had made the Winchester Mystery House into. So without further ado, I'm going to play the clip and get into the explanation.
Bring out the article Walter mentioned that detailed Houdini's visit here.
Yeah, so Houdini personally clipped up this piece of paper and put it in an envelope and sent it to John Brown.
Really?
So on the top of that sign, it says regards Houdini.
Houdini signed it?
Yeah, that's why I said that you can't touch it because it won't disintegrate because it's a very old piece of paper. Surprise.
I have to touch it.
Yeah, I'd want to touch it too. I can't fault him for that. I'd want to touch it too. All right, keep going.
So he literally has a signature right here. Look at Houdini. Houdini's hand, his eyes were focused on this article mentioning the Winchester Mystery House.
So in this clip, Bagans focuses primarily on the Houdini signature, which is cool. Don't get me wrong. It's really cool. I would love to have an artifact with Houdini's signature on it. That would be fabulous. The first paragraph mentions Houdini actually visiting the mansion, that he went there the week prior to this article being published. The second paragraph is a quote from Houdini that gives a different version of why the Winchester house is supposed to be haunted, which really piqued my curiosity. Like, I was like, what is this? What am I reading here? Because I did find the article, by the way. I did find it. It's right here. It was originally published November 3rd, 1924. The newspaper clipping in the episode is a different edition, and it's the next day, November 4th. So I don't know too much about this and about like a lot of the history of the Winchester house. I mean, I'm familiar with it, but I turned to my friend Adrian Hill, who wrote an article for Skeptical Inquirer magazine. It was actually a cover article. All about the myths surrounding the Winchester Mystery House. And I reached out to her and asked her about some information about this and her take on it. So let's go to that. All right, so after minutes of begging, Adrian Hill has agreed to come on and give us her knowledge in this area because you wrote an article about this kind of stuff.
I did.
You did, and it was a great art. It was the cover. It was on the cover. It was really
Isn't that
good.
amazing? I wish I had it here with me to hold it up. You know.
Well, don't worry. You know what? I'll probably put a picture of it right in the middle of us.
Perfect.
So I brought you on because the newspaper clipping that I'm talking about in this video that was sent to the Winchester Mystery House included some information from Houdini, allegedly quoted from Houdini, that raised some red flags. And the first one was his origin story. So basically, it says that 37 years ago, Mrs. Winchester was told by a spiritualist that the reason a person dies is because that a person does not continue to build additions to the house in which she lives. The spirit rots in the house that doesn't grow, the spiritualist declared. So consequently, Mrs. Winchester started adding to her home for 37 years because of this. Now, this is a different story than I'm used to hearing. What are your thoughts here?
It is not what actually happened according to the records and from anything that we can guess from letters, communications, etc. And from what historians, particularly Mary Jo Ignafo, discovered about her.
Okay.
I think the biggest lie there is that she continuously had construction on her home for the 37 years until she died. She did not do that. It stopped after the San Francisco earthquake in 1906. And she boarded it up, made it safe to continue to be habitated by her staff who ran a farm. And she ceased building at that point. She was getting old, her health was deteriorating, and she didn't do it anymore. And there is no evidence at all that she went to see a medium. And could she have? Sure. I mean, we can't say for sure, but there's no evidence. And her staff said she was one of the most level-headed people they knew, and she was not a spiritualist.
That's important, because the story that I always heard was that she went to a medium
Yeah.
and not necessarily a spiritualist, but just a
Mhm.
medium. And she was told that the spirits were angry because of all the people that were killed by the Winchester rifle, and
Mhm.
that she had to keep building to satisfy or appease them, the spirits, so they'd have places to go and confuse the spirits so they could never just find her or something like that. So, I mean, that's very different than what I'm seeing here.
Correct.
You know,
Yeah,
'cause-
there's so many different stories actually.
Right.
There's not just one track. There's lots of different stories. Especially if you go back to the early newspapers, and they've evolved over time, like folklore tends to do, like stories tend to do.
Right.
And I think the biggest disservice to her is this idea that she kept building this house to house the spirits, or to keep building so she wouldn't die, whatever the reason is. And I've heard both of those. It was because she had a passion for architecture. It's much simpler. She loved it. She subscribed to architectural magazines, and she went to shows that, to help her design the home. And she had a passion, and she had the money. So she kept building because it was a fun thing for her to do.
And it kept people employed.
Oh, you bet.
I think that's one of the things you brought up, was that it kept people working. And
for sure. And there was a depression that happened during the 1890s, and she kept everybody on and kept them employed. And apparently her staff loved her, to the point of her gardener actually named his daughter after her.
Oh,
so,
wow.
Yeah.
Okay. That's nice. I mean, she sounds like a great person. I mean, just all around. And
smart
yeah.
woman. She managed her own finances at that time.
It's a shame that her reputation has been soiled, because it's people just wanted to make a buck and make an attraction, and started spreading these.
Yeah, and that's what the attraction was. And there is some validity to the attraction, in that these rumors started when she was alive, and they just ran with them, because it was unusual for a woman to be sort of secluded and not participating in the social aspects of rich life, wealthy life.
Right.
She kept to herself, she kept to her family. And so people started inventing stories to explain her unusual behavior. And they published them in the papers. So
it's the damned if you do, damned if you don't mentality,
Yeah.
Like, you can't just be yourself. If you be yourself, people are going to poke fun at you and have fun at your expense.
And it was very common for women of wealthy households to be spiritualists. So to believe in it, to seek out seances. It was a very in thing to do at the time. So it would not have been unusual for her, with her status, to actually do this. However, it does not appear that actually happened.
Okay. Another part of this newspaper article was a seance room. So Houdini is quoted as saying that she had a seance room without corners, so that the spirits wouldn't hurt themselves coming in and out. I think that's just kind of silly, and I can't see Houdini saying that, because why would you say the spirits who are already dead are afraid to hurt themselves?
I thought they could walk through walls.
What is with that? What do you know about a seance room?
Well, the seance room that's on the tour is a very small room, and apparently was not the seance room, but was a bedroom. And I think in the end, it was the gardener's bedroom. It was not a seance room. It has corners.
Okay. All right.
In fact, when I was on a tour, I went on 2 tours when we went, and neither of those tours took us to a room with no corners. So I've never heard of that before until you told me about this, until you sent me this article.
Okay.
I have no idea what that is. But no, apparently there wasn't a seance room, and the seance room on the tour is a bedroom with corners.
Okay.
Or used to be a bedroom with corners.
Yeah, I think in the episode they go to what they call the witch's hat, which looks like a turret on the top, and it's just it's like a big open attic kind of area that has no corners because it's circular. But
that makes sense. Yeah.
So they do their ghost hunting thing, and they ooh and ah and scream and scare themselves. But enough of that. The last thing,
before you go on to that. The staff never said she had held seances. So they actually tried to refute it in the papers.
Wow.
And there are actual articles somewhere. I did find one, if I remember correctly, that did try to debunk all of those things, but it wasn't popular. The sensationalized versions
Right.
were popular.
Yeah.
She sounds familiar, huh?
That doesn't work. Forget that. Let's go back to bullshitting people.
Yeah.
'Cause that works. The last thing I want to ask you about is, it says here that Mrs. Winchester has a vast wardrobe of variously colored robes, and she uses a different robe for each spirit.
That's a lot of robes. If there's, I've heard up to 1,600 spirits were housed in that house, so that would be a lot of robes.
Walk-in closet. Like, that's half the mansion just for clothes.
Yeah.
So what do you know about that?
I don't know a lot about it, to be honest. I think the only thing that I found was an old article by Joe Nickel, and he mentions the robes, and it was 13 robes that they mentioned, and that might have to do with the lore around her loving the number 13. That apparently isn't true either. That's a guess on my part. And there's no evidence that she ever had those robes. So I think the story is a story.
It's in the October 2002 or September-October 2002 issue of Skeptical Inquirer. If you guys want to check it out yourselves, it's available online as long as you have a subscription. So check it out. And he actually talks about it and does tell you up front there is no evidence for these robes being a thing or being there. So
not even 13. Forget the thousands of possible robes she could have had. So
I think go ahead.
No, I was going to say the only thing that I might be wrong with is in Mary Jo Ignofo's book. I know that when they opened the safe, for example, they were expecting to find evidence of the seances, such as the golden plates that were apparently used to serve meals to the spirits, and they weren't found. The robes weren't found. There was no evidence of robes.
The spirits of dead people that don't have to eat anymore. Okay, just making sure. All right. Well, thank you for your time. I appreciate you coming on and clearing up some of these things. And I look
Thanks
forward
for having
to
me.
more of your work.
I can't wait to see this video. I'm really looking forward to it.
All right. That was fun. I love Adrienne Hill. She's so much fun. She's so full of giggles. Anyway, before we move on to the final segment, the main course, if you will, I wanted to point out with this newspaper clipping that Zak focuses on, again, the signature, which, again, I agree is cool, but he ignores the rest of the text that's written across the top of the page. Now, we see some of it in a close-up that they provide during the show. They give you this, which only says your place, and then regards Houdini. So that's all we get, but that's not the full message. And we can tell that there's more. From a longer shot earlier in the show, we can see that there's more writing across the top. I was curious about what it said. I wanted to know what was scribbled on there because, like I said in the beginning, Zak has a habit of embellishing things or not doing proper research, and he also hides some facts throughout like his history. And me going back and forth with him, I've noticed that he left out lots of information. So I reached out to the Winchester Mystery House and I spoke with and I'm sorry if I butcher this name, but it's a Janin Boehm or Boehm. And she's the historian, and she's also in charge of special projects. So she couldn't provide a photograph of the newspaper because she said all she had was a really faded one. But she did give me the text of the full message. And the full message says, "Not as I stated, but an ad for your place. Regards, Houdini." Building upon that, it was great to have the full quote, but my OCD, self-diagnosed, was kicking in, and I really needed to have a photograph of the entire newspaper. So I reached out to John Cox, again from the Wild About Harry website, and he was able to provide me with this image, which clearly shows everything. It shows the entire newspaper clipping, and it shows the close-up or the full quote on top. And as you can see, it does say, "Not as I stated, but an ad for your place. Regards, Houdini. So this begs the question, what exactly was misquoted? What exactly was not as he stated in that article? But we don't know. So it really calls into question anytime this article is brought up. And unfortunately, throughout the episode, the article is brought up multiple times, saying, this is the room that Houdini said was the seance room, or this is a closet where there's robes in it, and could have been what Houdini was talking about. But we actually don't know what Houdini was talking about, or if he spoke those words at all. So I just wanted to put that out there. Understand that sometimes people are misquoted, and this is a good example of it, and it's also a good example of we're never going to know exactly what was misquoted. So we probably should take that newspaper and just treat it as a cool artifact that was signed by a famous guy, and that's it. Don't take the information as fact.
Behind this photo is something that we can't explain. Okay?
Oh my gosh. To me, it looks like a Tesla coil back in the day when it would explode with energy. So like it's something exploding during this, and you're still all sitting there.
We're still now.
Yeah, so it's like, is that the energy of the spirit communicating to the board?
That's amazing. That's incredible.
It's instant. Look, there's nothing on the back. We didn't scribble on it. It's in the photo.
So it's in the photo because you set the camera up to take the photo. I mean, he literally tells you the process for getting this photo before they show you the photo and before they show the photo on screen. They tell you how they're taking these pictures, and in it, they tell you straight up, it's a long exposure. Watch.
At this point, we all wear UV protective glasses so Aaron can take extended exposure ultraviolet Polaroid photos.
We're recording with my forensic UV camera, and Aaron's taking time-lapse UV Polaroids.
All right, so we are given two descriptions here. The first one is by Zak Bagans himself. It's a voiceover over the clip, and he's talking about his crew member, Aaron, who is taking extended exposure ultraviolet Polaroid photos. So I want to break that down because there's a couple things wrong with that. First, you might be thinking, especially if you're my age or older, that Polaroid cameras were always instant cameras. You had one of these things. You guys remember these, right? But you push the button, it went and spit out the Polaroid picture, which was something like this. It would come out here, you would take it. Most people would shake it, which you're not supposed to do. You'd put it down, face down, and wait 5 minutes, and you'd have your picture developed. Instant photo. But in modern cameras, modern Polaroid cameras, like this one, the Polaroid Now Plus, which is the exact camera that they're using on this episode, they're using the app to take pictures. So yes, you can connect your phone to this camera and take all sorts of pictures. You have different options, including something called light painting. So if you look at this quick montage of Aaron, the guy actually taking the Polaroid photos, you can see in his hand, he has his phone. He's standing next to the Polaroid Now Plus, which is on a tripod, and he's got an orange screen on his phone. So he's using the light painting feature, the option to take all these photos. And it's a telltale sign. In photography, light painting is a technique. It's a creative technique, and it uses moving light sources. Photographers use like flashlights or LEDs from your phone, sparklers, even steel mesh that is flammable and really cool. It creates some really cool effects. But we use all of this in order to paint or draw in the air during a long exposure. And that's what we're dealing with here. We're dealing with long exposure photography. So as the camera's shutter stays open for an extended period of time, the light that we create trails around the scene. So the camera captures these trails as beams or streams of light, glowing shapes. We can make words, we can make patterns, as long as we're in a dark background. It combines photography and performance to produce really unique and luminous images. It's really, really cool. But on the other side here, on the flip side of this technique, you can have anything that's in the background that's moving create a light trail. That's unintentional. Maybe there's a helicopter or a plane that's flying across the sky behind you and you don't notice it, but after a 30-second or a minute exposure, you'll have this little trail that you didn't expect. Going further with that, if you pick up the camera during a long exposure, any light source, and that includes reflected light, so any light source in the scene will now begin to shift. And you can get blurry images, you can get light streaks. Say if someone has their phone on a table and you pick up the camera and move it around, that phone will cause a light streak across the scene. And that's what we're seeing in this alleged ghost photo that Zak is presenting to the public. If we look at this right here, we can see there's lines all over the place. There's also a candle on the table, and we know this is a candle because if we look at earlier footage of them taking these pictures, we can see that in fact there is a candle on the table, and this is a battery operated candle. You get it like Walmart or Target or something like that. If you also notice in this original photo that there's multiple images of that single candle. There was only one candle there, but we have multiple images, and this is caused by moving the camera around. But just don't take my word for it. Let me recreate it for you, because I happen to have one of these candles, and it also lights up. So I'm going to put it on a table. I'm going to set it up with a bunch of other ghost hunting gadgets in the dark with the Polaroid now, plus on long exposure or the light painting mode. And I'm going to take some pictures, and you're going to see me in this clip shake the tripod that the camera's on all around, and I'll show you the end result.
So we're going to open up the app. We got the whole setup here. Camera's ready. Okay. Let's do 10 seconds.
So here's the result, and you can see there's 3 separate images of that candle. It was the same candle, it wasn't moved around. The tripod and camera were picked up, as you saw in the video, and just moved around. And every time it's settled for about 2-3 seconds, it captured this good sharp image of the candle in a different spot. Above the candles, you can see these glowing trails coming from each candle, and that is when the camera was actually in motion, and it created this light trail from light painting. Since I had everything set up the other night, I figured I'll just use the rest of the film pack. I had 4 images, so I took them all, playing with it, messing around, moving the camera and all that, and what you see on screen right now are the results of those other 3 photos. Now you can see that the one I did take earlier in the day, so it's not that great. The other 2, this one shows a shadowy figure in it. That's me, because I had walked into the frame and stood there for a few seconds and then walked out. So it got my shadowy figure. And then the other one shows all the squiggly lines, like it's drawing all over the place, just like you see in Zak's photo that he claims is the most shocking photographic evidence ever. So there you go. Easily recreated by just setting up for 5 minutes. However, I wanted to take it a step further. I wanted to get as close a recreation as possible. So while my friend Melanie Teresa King, who you know from previous videos, and her husband Anthony were visiting with us a few weeks back when we originally started talking about this video and making this video, I asked them if they wouldn't mind taking part. And so by this photo, this is a wide Polaroid, it's actually a Fujifilm camera, but it's a wide format that I took of Anthony, Melanie, and my wife Donna sitting at our dining room table. I started setting up a bunch of ghost hunting equipment, and I had the candle in the background. And I even covered the chandelier with like a cloth, because that's what it looks like in the original video at the Winchester mansion. So we did that, and the results were fun. We have all the characteristics of the most shocking photo from Zak Bagans. There's nothing supernatural about it. There's nothing paranormal. There's no ghostly. There's no seance required. In the end, it's just a trick. Hopefully that clears up everything about the extended exposure terminology that's being used, more like word salad, by Zak Bagans. And I wanted to get to the second thing that he says in the original voiceover, which kicked off that entire rant for the last 5 minutes. So he mentions this.
Ultraviolet Polaroid photos.
And the other guy on his crew refers to them as
UV Polaroids.
All right, so let's address that. There was only one type of ultraviolet film that Polaroid made ever, and that was a security feature. Basically this. It's for IDs. And when you took pictures with this, the photograph came out perfect. I mean, you were supposed to take pictures of people for like driver's license and like employee IDs and stuff like that. And the only thing that was UV was a watermark. It was a security mark that actually says Polaroid. And you can see examples here, which I got this film. I've had this film. I tried to take some pictures, but the film already expired. It didn't work. But the UV watermark is still there, and you can see it in these photos. That was it. There was no actual UV film to take specific ultraviolet photos. So that's wrong. The second description comes from another person on his crew, and that gentleman is describing that he's taking pictures with his forensic UV camera. And I gotta say, it doesn't look anything special. It doesn't look like a forensic professional style camera. It is simply a digital camera, and they have a UV floodlight that's sitting on the table right there. So that's it. It's nothing special. You can do that with any of your cameras. You can do that with your phone. You can set it up and just use a UV light, and you will be able to get pictures with it. So nothing fancy or forensic about it. The second thing that he says is that he also describes what Aaron is doing with the extended exposure ultraviolet Polaroid photos, except that this gentleman describes it as time-lapse UV Polaroids. And that is an incorrect definition. Time-lapse means that it's a technique where a series of still images are captured at set intervals over a period of time. So if I want to set my camera up to take a picture every 10 seconds, so over a minute, I'll have 6 pictures. So that's a time-lapse photo. So he's not doing time-lapse, he's doing long exposures, which means the shutter opens up and it stays open for an extended period of time and then closes. It doesn't take pictures every 10 seconds or every minute or anything like that, or any time interval. It's continuously open, exposing the film. So the scientific terminology that he's using is word salad. All right, so it's been about a week since I filmed the rest of the video, and I want to come on and kind of wrap this up, give you my final thoughts on this. So first and foremost, this is a show for entertainment. This is in no way, no form, no how to be taken seriously. Honestly, it's not a serious investigative show. It is for entertainment. That means they are trying to entertain you, the audience, so that you will continue to watch. And that way sponsors will be investing money into the show so that Zach and his gang can run around and do their ghost hunting stuff. And as I said in the beginning, I wasn't going segment by segment throughout the entire show because it's an hour-long show and that way too much to unpack. But we did look at a few points that demanded more research than they were willing to put into it. So, for example, Bess Houdini and the idea that she was planning another seance, a Houdini Séance, 2 years after she had ended her 10-year promise that she had made her husband. There was more to the story than what they gave you. We also looked at the idea that Zach and his gang are at the top of their field because they excel at whatever field they think they are on top of. So we also showed you the newspaper that Houdini had sent the Winchester Mystery House that featured the Mystery House in the article. And instead of showing you the partial quote that was shown in the episode, we showed you the entire quote and that there was missing information and that it changes the entire context of the article that Houdini was quoted in. That's really important. And by not including that, it's being deceptive to your audience. Speaking of deceptive, we also showed the Polaroid photo, which is supposed to be the most shocking photographic evidence ever. But we demonstrated that it wasn't just something they captured, it was something they made on purpose. So They knew what they were doing. They told you they were using long exposure photography. We could see that they were using their phone. We saw the setup. They were lying to you. And this brings me to the point of watching these shows, of being a fan of these shows. They're not just for entertainment. They are outright fabricating evidence in order to make you believe that they're telling the truth, or make it seem like they are better at investigating than they really are. There's no doubt in my mind that they knew what they were doing when they created this photograph. At least Aaron knew, because he was the one that was taking the photographs. And to have Zak Bagans do a voiceover telling you exactly the type of photographs they were taking, extended exposure photos, that tells me he's either completely ignorant of what that term means, or he's completely on board with faking it. And that's why I keep coming back to Zak. Every so often I come back to one of his shows or an item that he promotes as haunted, which they never are, because he spins this tale that sounds really good. He's a very dramatic kind of actor. He's like the William Shatner of the paranormal. So I guess in closing, just understand that by you guys watching this, and if you do, I mean, if you want it for entertainment, that's you. But if you keep watching these kind of shows, they will continue to get the ratings. I mean, 27 seasons of Ghost Adventures. Why? It spreads nothing but misinformation, bad methodology, a complete misunderstanding and ignorance of any kind of equipment they're using, and it basically dumbs down everyone that watches it. Look, if you really want to learn how to investigate these kind of things or learn about science, follow CFI, the Center for Inquiry. Follow Skeptical Inquirer. Follow the work that I do. Follow the work of Benjamin Rafford. Follow Joe Nickel, what he has written in the past, because he's got tons of books out there that deal with this kind of stuff. I know Ben's got hundreds of articles out there about different paranormal topics and going from a scientific perspective. Listen to people like Melanie Trusick King from Thinking is Power to understand about science and how to investigate things. Read stuff by Daniel Reed, who writes for Skeptical Inquirer. And a plethora of other people. Mick West. Oh my goodness, Susan Gerbic. And all these people that really strive to bring you the best information possible, to explain what you're looking at, to explain how things are done, and to show their work. That's the most important thing. Show your work, how you got to that point. Where we don't see that in these kind of TV shows, these ghost hunting TV shows. They skip that part, or they edit things out. They take a line that you give the camera and they cut it in half. Or they just take a newspaper with a handwritten quote on the top and they only show you part of it and not the rest of it. It's deceptive, it's dishonest, and it's misleading. That's all I really got to say. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, give us a thumbs up. If you like this video and you want to see more, subscribe to the channel, because that'll be great. That'll help me out a lot. And remember, never stop learning. See ya.